Well, greetings, church family. Today's daily Bible reading had us in Numbers chapters 8, 9, and 10. And in chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, we get a reminder of how the Lord required his people to follow his instructions down to the most intricate of details, in this case, the golden lampstand and where Aaron was to place his lamps on it. In verses 5 through 22, we see the cleansing ritual of the Levites, who, remember, were a symbolic substitute for the firstborn of the sons of Israel, since, of course, all Israel belonged to the Lord. The Levites then would represent the firstborn sons of Israel and, by effect, represent all of Israel in their service to the Lord at the tabernacle. And we see in verses 17 through 19 how important this is. God says, every firstborn among the sons of Israel, they are all his, among all the men, among all the animals too. And it all goes back to, once again, the Exodus, that final plague, right? That day that he struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, he sanctified the firstborn of Israel for himself, set them apart. And then he's taken the Levites instead of every firstborn among the sons of Israel. The Levites are the gift to Aaron and his sons, the priesthood, from among the sons of Israel to perform the service. And this protects the rest of Israel from coming near to the sanctuary where they might be plagued because of their sin. So this is a real protection for everyone. In chapter 8, verses 23 through 26, we even see that there's a retirement plan for the Levites at the age of 50. How about that? That would be sure special. But of course, they could still volunteer afterward, and that was important for them to keep in mind as well. In chapter 9, verses 1 through 14, the Passover instructions were once again repeated to the people, as well as a provision made, notice, very important, for those who had been made unclean due to contact with a dead body, or who were on a journey and thus could not be with the people for Passover. The Lord graciously allowed them to still partake. And there's a striking contrast, isn't there, between the men who were unclean because they had gone to a dead body and touched a dead body, but they wanted to participate in the Passover celebration and worship of the Lord. Contrast between them and any clean men who did not participate. God says the latter would be cut off from the people. In chapter 9, verses 15 through 23, we see that cloud by day, fire by night, which the Lord had already used to bring the people through a portion of the wilderness by this point, well, it signified whether the people would remain camped or pack up to travel where the Lord led them. And the presence of the Lord manifested over the tabernacle must have been a sight to behold. This would be a constant reminder of the Lord's presence in the midst of the people. How amazing that would be. In chapter 10, verses 1 through 10, we see that silver trumpets were commissioned with instructions about when and why to blow them and how the people and their tribal leaders were to respond. And the trumpet blasts that called people to assemble were probably different in tone and duration from the blasts that signaled an alarm for battle. Perhaps the ones for battle were real staccato, just short bursts and a bunch of them. Perhaps the tone would be different. Somehow the people knew exactly which one was for assembly, which one was alarm for battle. And interestingly, only Aaron and his male descendants, the priesthood, could blow the trumpets, even for war. There was no separate kind of department of defense here within the people. No, it was all a ministry together. And Aaron and his fellow priests were actually over this ministry as well. And this tied the people's recognition of Yahweh as their only God into everything they did as a group, whether assembling for worship or going into battle. As we see in verse 9 of chapter 10, what's the reminder there, right? They will be a reminder of you before your God. I am Yahweh, your God. You blow those trumpets. Blow those trumpets, in verses 9 and 10 says, and this is that covenant. It is a reminder before the Lord that you belong to him, and he will protect you and fulfill his word to give the land to the people, the land flowing with milk and honey that was promised all the way back to Abraham within the Abrahamic covenant. Well, in verses 11 through 28 of chapter 10, the Israelites are now ready to set out for the land of promise. Oh, it would have been a terrific day of excitement, a day that if you had fireworks, you'd be shooting them off. Kids are dancing, songs are going on. I'm sure how excited they must have been to finally be traveling to that land flowing with milk and honey. And the tribes were organized, if you see, to protect the people from enemies who might attack from any direction, and indeed there will be enemies who do so, and to protect the Ark of the Covenant and other elements of the tabernacle as well. And that protection extended to the following verses as well. In verses 29 through 36, we see that Moses invites his brother-in-law Hobab to join the procession as a kindness to his in-laws, but also as a way of protecting the Israelites and the resources they possessed, the manpower that could be captured and brought into slavery, the riches that they carried with them to protect those from enemy spies as well. And Moses had, as we end the chapter, had a couple of ritual sayings whenever they began and ended travel. And notice they were totally focused on who? On the Lord and trusting him for protection. Some principles and application we get from these 3 chapters. When we face repetition in the scriptures, and we faced it quite a few times already, just talking about the Passover once again, we see it. Well, we ought to be reminded how much the Lord cares for you and I if you belong to him, how much he cares for his people. He would repeat himself. He did this in the Old Testament. He did this in the New Testament. Repetition is the key to learning, and the key to learning is repetition. And God wanted his people then, he wants his people now, to learn about his character and actions so that we can know him more, love and fear him more, and worship him in all things. As 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, we can't separate when that worship is to occur. We are to glorify the Lord whether we eat or drink or whatever we do. And we also are reminded once again of God's holy character. Those who belong to him are made righteous in his sight when he saves them. They are consecrated in that manner, in a very positional sense, set apart. If you trust in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you become set apart positionally, made holy positionally, in the sense that you would no longer be in the domain of darkness and instead are citizens of the kingdom of Christ. And yet we still need to pursue holiness, practical sanctification, obedience to the Lord day by day, seeking to reflect his holiness in our lives, bringing him glory throughout. And God is worthy of trust, as the Israelites trusted him to protect throughout their travels. Moses pointing to the Lord and trusting him. Well, God is worthy of that trust. He provides and he protects, as Psalm 23 begins with. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, right? He provides and protects. He has his rod, he has his staff. They comfort, they provide, they protect. Do you trust him? And the Lord is omnipresent and infinite. We're reminded of this in these 3 chapters as well. He doesn't take a back seat during battle. He doesn't take a back seat during assembly. He is there all the time. There's no keeping God to just a corner of the believer's life. So I want to urge you, don't put God into a portion of your life. If you've trusted in Jesus Christ for salvation from everlasting judgment, then let the Lord be your all in all. Well, this has been Numbers chapters 8 through 10, and I hope you have a great day.